Why do I feel like an imposter? How to Understand and Cope with Imposter Syndrome by Dr Sandi Mann. Narrated by Esther Wayne. Introduction. Imposter Syndrome. The belief that you are fraudulently claiming to be something you are not, that you are not as good as other people think you are. When I first came across the term as a psychology postgraduate, I was convinced that someone must have had access to my secret thoughts. The term described me so well. But then it transpired that most of my colleagues had come to the same conclusion and thought the term was created especially for them, and most of my social circle thought the same too. Could we really all be suffering from imposter syndrome? It turned out that we probably were, or at least 70% of us may have been, according to the research. For me, it was a wry moment of self-awareness on my continuing journey of self-discovery. But after that, I didn't really pay the concept more than fleeting attention every so often over the years, as I built up my career as a psychologist. Fast forward a couple of decades, and the term imposter syndrome, or IS, has become much more significant to me, because I have started to see it appear more and more in one guise or another in my private clinic. Seemingly successful people, men, women, and often teenagers too, are presenting with symptoms of this condition, and they are convinced that they are the only ones who have it. IS seems to be a rising phenomenon, and in this book I explore the varied reasons, including social media and increased testing in schools to name just two, for its rapid growth. IS also no longer seems to be restricted to ambitious and successful careerists, as once was thought. I see a variety of types of the syndrome in my clinic, such as the mother who feels she is not a good enough parent, the dad who feels he is not man enough, the friend who believes they are not popular enough, and even the religious person who feels they are not good enough for their God. The first step to managing IS, which can be very debilitating in terms of self-confidence and self-esteem, as well as being harmful to career progression, are to recognize and understand it, and learn to spot its triggers. And this is what I have set out to achieve with this book. Only from this position of understanding can we look for the best strategies for each of us to use, and I suggest a range of appropriate coping techniques throughout the book. Who is this book for? Anyone who thinks they may be experiencing IS, whether that be within work, home, family, or community life. Anyone who thinks their partner, a family member, friend, or child is experiencing IS. Parents who want to minimize the chances of their own children succumbing to IS. Anyone else who is interested in the imposter phenomenon. What will you gain from this book? With a mixture of information, self-assessment quizzes, and helpful coping tips and strategies, this book will help you to understand if you, or someone close to you, has IS, and if so, what you can do about it. It aims to make you more confident in your abilities at work, home, or elsewhere, and, above all, will help you to realize that you are not alone if you experience IS, and that it can be managed. How to use this book. The first two chapters are essential listening for everyone, as together we explore what imposter syndrome is and why it occurs so widely, and learn about some of its different subtypes. There are also two quizzes to help you understand if you are experiencing it. The following 5 chapters explore IS in relation to specific groups of people and in specific social settings. Although these chapters are built around these groups, they are useful for all listeners. Finally, a short concluding chapter draws together what we have learned and offers some insight into how you can most usefully take this forward into your own life. Throughout each chapter, you will find case studies that illustrate real-life examples of people experiencing IS. Listen to these to see just how the syndrome really can be found in all walks of life. I hope they will encourage any sufferers to identify IS within themselves as a first step on the way to swapping their self-doubt for self-confidence. At the end of chapters 3 to 7 are tips and strategies on coping with IS and building that self-confidence. Some of these are specific to the group discussed in that chapter, but most are applicable to everyone, so be sure to listen to them all in order to get the most out of this book. Chapter 1. What is imposter syndrome? When Jess came into my clinic in Manchester, she looked every inch the successful woman, immaculately groomed, wearing a sharp suit and sporting an equally sharp haircut. Accomplishment oozed from her every pore. A 42-year-old senior executive in a large international corporation, she had the salary, the car, and all the perks that spelled made it. So why was she at my clinic? As she sank into a comfortable chair and began to explain her problem, her demeanour underwent a transformation. Her shoulders began to slump, her voice wavered, her knees shook, and her fingers began twisting around each other as she talked. Her entire confident manner crumbled before my eyes as she confessed that it was all fake. All of her successes were built on luck, she explained, and she was actually really bad at her job. While she had managed to pull the wool over the eyes of her colleagues and bosses for many years, she was sure they would uncover her secret soon. She stood to lose everything, but that wasn't even the biggest problem. The greater issue was that she was struggling to live with being a fake. She felt that she should quit her job before she was exposed and go and do something more suited to her real abilities. It would mean less money and perks, but at least she would be being honest with herself. Welcome to the world of the imposter syndrome. It is a secret world, inhabited by successful people from all walks of life who have one thing in common. They believe that they are not really good enough. They might be men or women, young or old. Even hugely successful public figures are not immune. And imposter beliefs are not always related to work. I have met imposters who feel they are not good enough parents, husbands, wives, friends, or even not good enough human beings. These are all variations of imposter syndrome, especially when there is little objective evidence to support the sufferer's firmly held self-beliefs that they are frauds. This chapter will help you to identify the symptoms of imposter syndrome and understand if you have it, and, if so, which type of IS is most likely to match your own experience. So, what is imposter syndrome? The term imposter syndrome, or imposter phenomenon, was first coined in 1978 by clinical psychologists Pauline R. Clance and Suzanne A. Imes in a paper entitled The Imposter Phenomenon in High-Achieving Women, Dynamics and Therapeutic Intervention. The condition was described as being an internal experience of intellectual phonies that afflicted some high-achieving women. In their paper, Clance and Imes described their sample group of 150 women as follows. Despite their earned degrees, scholastic honours, high achievement on standardized tests, praise and professional recognition from colleagues and respected authorities, they do not experience an internal sense of success. They consider themselves to be imposters. They go on to explain that these women believe they have only achieved their success due to errors in selection processes, or because someone has overestimated their abilities, or that it is due to some other external source. Clance and Imes claim that there are 3 defining characteristics of IS. 1. The belief that others have an inflated view of your abilities or skills. 2. The fear that you will be found out and exposed as a fake. 3. The persistent attribution of success to external factors, such as luck or an extraordinary level of hard work. Who is affected? Since this first foray into the world of imposters in the 1970s, research has shown that the condition can affect men and women in equal numbers. And, in fact, the creators of the term later pointed out that they prefer to call it imposter experience, because condition or syndrome suggests a mental illness. The imposter experience is actually far more pedestrian than that, with Clance claiming that it is something almost everyone experiences. Indeed, as indicated in the introduction, research suggests that 70% of us will experience this phenomenon for at least a period in our lives, although it is more common among high achievers. This classification of IS as an experience, rather than a condition, is still reflected in the medical field. IS is not classified as a mental illness or condition in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM-5, which is the diagnostic manual that most mental health professionals refer to in order to identify, classify, and diagnose a mental health condition. This means that you are not mentally ill.